CES 2016 coverage, sponsored in part by GoDaddy.com. Visit TPNTV/GoDaddy to save as much as 30% on hosting accounts. Get 99cent.coms. All our promo codes will save you significant money at GoDaddy.com.
We are joined by our first guest of the day, and we appreciate it. We're with Brian Stofiel of Stofiel Aerospace. Welcome to the show. We appreciate you coming on.
Well, thank you.
You are fully dressed, and I appreciate it. I feel like I should have put on a better suit today to be more fit in the occasion. But tell us what you bring to the table at CES this year.
We're actually funding a microsatellite launch system. Coming out of Kent State University. We're here with the University Innovation section. And what we're doing is we're putting rockets on weather balloons, sending the weather balloon to 100,000 feet, and then launching the rocket from there. Our payload is only 15 kilograms, which is about 30 pounds. So we're not a real big launch system. And this is what we're trying to do. What happens right now is these little launch cubesats are being put on big rockets, and then they're waiting 4 to 7 years to get a launch. So there's a bottleneck in the launch system itself, and that's what we're trying to address, is that bottleneck. But the bigger issue is, and the reason we're here at CES, is this is the first step of on-demand access to low Earth orbit, and that's going to give everybody more access to space in general. This system is actually later on, as we progress with manufacturing, we're going to drop that price down to about $1,000 a pound to orbit, and that number, and that number makes it accessible to everyone. Now your 30-pound satellite, you can put it into orbit for $30,000. That's almost within reach of everybody out there.
Okay, so I have to ask, because I'm a little bit ignorant to things in space, although I love rockets and things in space.
I have a segment that I call Drones in Space, so I'm actually going to love this conversation, by the way.
What does it cost right now to launch a weather balloon into low orbit or something similar?
The CubeSats right now, they're getting charged between $900,000 and $1.5 million.
And the thing you have to understand, Nick, is they're going on regular rockets.
Yes.
So you have a drone that's the size of a bread box, right, that they want to put into orbit. Okay, and they're going up on regular rockets.
The ones we see at the launches on TV.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then they're being deployed. Now, they might put a bunch of them on that one rocket, but it's still extremely expensive. In fact, generally putting it into orbit is dramatically more expensive than the actual drone itself.
Wow. Correct.
So,
and that's usually what's going to happen.
So what you're doing is amazing, by the way. So we're sorry, Brian.
That's all right.
Just had to bring the young set on
for ones who don't know. And maybe many of our audience will not know as well, and I think that's what's important here. So basically, we're circumventing that, and you guys are coming up with a solution to make that substantially cheaper.
Correct.
Phenomenal.
Our system is actually expendable, so unlike SpaceX, who they fly their systems home, we don't fly our system home. We let the rocket burn up in orbit, and that saves us on not just weight, but the complexity of the system. We don't have to have the aerodynamic systems. We don't have to have the superstructures, any of that stuff. The flight computer is very simple compared to what you would have to do with like a SpaceX flying your rocket home.
Yeah. So Brian, go through the process. Once you get to 100,000 feet, how do you deploy the drone into space, basically?
What we're doing is we're firing multiple solid rocket engines through a single exhaust system of our design. Okay, and this allows us to actually throttle a solid rocket motor, which is unheard of. Right now, all they do is they light the solid rocket motor and it burns. And it just burns out. And that's what the boosters you usually see, like on the side of the shuttle. What we're actually doing is able to throttle a little bit to give us a correct orbital insertion for those satellites. But what happens is our rocket goes off the balloon, it goes into orbit, and then we use a shape charge to separate the satellite from the rest of the system.
So when a company builds a drone for space, and I mean, I don't mean to call it that. I just love that segment, drones in space, right? But that's what's going on right now. I mean, you don't need to have the big telemetry and all this other stuff that's going on with satellites right now, because generally speaking, we're just trying to take photographs or video of Earth or measurements or whatever it is, right? And you just need to have a drone that we use on the ground right now has much more capability than a lot of the satellites that we have orbiting the Earth. So you have this challenge of getting in there. I don't mean to take up all your time.
Well, these little CubeSats, these little microsatellites, our biggest market, of course, is the imaging market. Mining operations use spectral analysis to do, and then you've got agriculture and, of course, the natural resources. And then we also have another segment, which is the component testing. So if Lockheed Martin or Boeing wants to go to Mars or to the moon, they have a new hinge. They want to test that in space before they actually put it on a spacecraft.
Interesting. Sure.
And then our third market is the on-demand market, and that would be like FEMA or natural disasters. And those would be ones that we can put up within a couple hours. Unlike a liquid system, we can store our system for long periods of time and still be able to use them. So we could actually forest fires. You can get an image every 80 minutes of a thermal imaging of the forest fire, and that'll help those firefighters. Or if you have an earthquake, and now we've got an imaging satellite up within a couple hours. You don't really want to task a big satellite system, $1 billion satellite system. If you move its orbit, you kill its lifespan, and you don't want to do that. So these little satellites are what's taking over that type of industry.
So are you thinking that somebody like Nick and I could actually deploy one of these systems?
We are.
Really?
We're working with the FAA and NASA to create a research orbit. And this would be an orbit that anybody could fire into. At first, we're going to start as a service industry. Okay, we're providing a service. But eventually, we see down the road being able to actually sell these units first to the universities and corporations. And then you'd come to us to train to fire it, and then we'd be able to sell you the launch system. And the launch system would be set up to just go to that research orbit that we've established.
So if there's like an earthquake, let's say San Francisco gets the big earthquake sometime or another, and it generates a tsunami that's pushing towards Hawaii. I'm just giving you catastrophic type of things that happen. Hawaii, in this particular thing, could actually deploy a satellite, put it up in the space, and be able to take reasonably good photographs, videos, whatever, every 80 minutes as this event is unfolding, and get this information back to whoever needs to. That is amazing.
Right, and that's what access to low Earth orbit means. I mean, we're giving on-demand access to low Earth orbit. Right now, there is no such thing. We've never had on-demand access to space.
So where are you at in this process?
We've done 2 prototype launches. We've gone to 65,000 feet and launched from there. And then we went to 100,000 feet, and we had a failure on our command module side. But we're actually in talks with a couple of different places, and we're in with Stofiel Aerospace producing a grant. And we're going to be within the next year firing an orbital shot at least once.
How high was the Red Bull jump?
At about 100,000, 125,000 feet.
Wow. Okay.
You can't get a balloon much higher at that. And I give the analogy of a cork. If you have a cork down at the bottom and you let it go, it'll only go to the top of the water. It won't go any higher.
Right.
And that's what we're using the balloon as.
That's fascinating. So
it really is.
Staying with the line of disaster, because that's something that's really intriguing to me, is the rapid response to things like that. So you have a catastrophe, earthquake, something major that happens. So FEMA would just call you and say, hey, we have to get this thing at the ready now, and then you have something that is ready to go and can clear all regulations within what's our timetable to launch?
Within a couple hours.
A couple hours.
Because the system is a solid rocket system, I'm not fueling up liquid systems.
Right.
I'm not having to do the cross checks in that. A solid rocket system, we can really build it and set it aside for 10 years, bring it back out, and it'll still fire like we just built it.
And then how do you clear that with the FAA so rapidly? Because I know with the space, there's so many things that goes involved into making sure that's okay to happen.
The FAA is not space.
Right.
Okay.
So FAA stops at 65,000 feet.
That's correct.
So we go to 65,000 feet as a weather balloon, and that's the operations we fall under as an FAA. We do have a safety management system with them, and we are in contact with them. We call up center, and we make announcements when we release.
Gotcha.
But the big deal is that when we get up that way, we're using low Earth orbit, and there's not much stuff there, okay? Because most of that stuff is going to be a lot higher. Our orbit's only going to be about 2 weeks. So these things are really expendable. Even the CubeSats right now that go to the International Space Station, they fall out of orbit in a month or 2. So this is not space junk. This isn't a long-term.
Sure. Right.
And there's a new term out there. It's called a short-duration satellite, and that's what these are. Anything under 5 months or so is the short duration.
And they're talking about things like this for short-term communications and all this other stuff, correct?
Internet. South America's looking at it for internet operations, and so is China and everything.
And again, you go back to the disaster area. I mean, the first thing that would go down probably would be communication structure, right? You can deploy one of these things, all of a sudden you got cell phones working again. Yeah. So it's crazy. This is a unbelievable idea. It's unfortunate that we didn't actually have you on earlier in the show This is amazing what you have come up with here. So the funding side of this now, I know you're working on grants. I mean, are you thinking about other avenues?
We are looking for funding.
Okay.
It sounds like an expensive system to the regular person, but we're looking at about $15 million to bring us to commercial market. In the aerospace industry, that's nothing considering that Elon Musk spent $500 million in the first year.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So, and we're looking at different avenues of that. We've had a couple investors since we've been here, so we're going to be following up with them.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Actually, most of the investors we've had talked to are actually outside the U.S. We haven't had much interest inside the U.S.
That's interesting.
And that goes back to where the satellite is. So these little CubeSats, inside the U.S., they're in the university markets. They're in the big corporations. Outside the U.S., they're in private sector. So we're seeing a lot of international interest in ours. Because the guys inside the U.S. can use NASA. They can use SpaceX. Guys outside the U.S. have no choices. And that's what we want to be. We want to be that international choice. The mobility of the system, because the launch happens at 100,000 feet, I can launch this system from almost anywhere in the world without a launch pad. I don't need a Cape Canaveral or Mojave Desert.
Okay.
I take the balloon, I put the rocket on it. As long as the balloon can get above the obstructions, we're good to go. So we can really launch from dictated by the mission and less about where
location.
our launch for,
So does weather, if we're in a, I'm picking in North Dakota, if we're in a blizzard situation or whatever, would you be able to launch in those type of situations?
We've established some weather parameters for safety reasons because we're hanging below a balloon.
Right.
So as the wind comes up, I got to stay out of the jet stream, which is 600 miles an hour.
Right.
But as the balloon, we got to watch the winds. Visibility is not our real concern. It's that wind that we're really concerned with.
Okay.
So as long as the wind's fine, we're good to go. We usually require a VFR conditions, which is 2 miles and 5,000 feet of ceiling.
Okay.
And that gives us some kind of safety measures that we wouldn't have otherwise.
Okay. Very good.
Fascinating. So let's say if you want to, I know we have investors that do watch because we've had funding come through our show from people coming on the show. So if you're interested in contacting you, how can people do that?
My email address is Stofiel Aerospace @gmail.com. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter.
And you have your website.
And I've got a website.
Right. Yep.
And you're welcome to call us and contact us if you want more information. We're always willing to talk about this stuff.
And what's your website, Brian?
StofielAero.com and StofielAerospace.com.
Wonderful.
Will be coming online shortly.
Awesome. Well, I honestly wish you the best of luck. I hope this
Thank you.
works out because that's a fascinating thing. Me living in Florida, so close to the Space Coast, I watch all of the space launches as much as I can and try to learn about it. And you are changing the game on the way we can rapidly deploy something.
This is a disruptive technology.
I like it.
Very cool.
I like it.
Very cool.
And anything space is always cool. I mean,
I agree.
In general.
I agree. So
thanks again, Brian.
Thank you.
Good
Thanks,
luck
Brian.
with everything.
Take care.
Pleasure.
Take care.
Wow. Well.